think that there is some truth to this whole idea of the Djinn infection being the, shall we say, not the answer, but one of the probable solutions we can go to, or causes we can go to, and solutions, in order to deal with the insanity of the West. Uh, it's also worth noting, what can we do for protection? Well, I'm going to put it out there that probably pagans are immune, and so are Satanists and Luciferians, and I'll tell you why. Remember, Lucifer is not from the Bible. Lucifer is a pagan god from Rome, the brother of Diana, the son of Aurora. And Satanism is just a form of kind of like ritualized atheism. Nothing to do with devil worship. Neither one have anything to do with devil worship. Now, we have to look at the history first, right? Europe before Christianity, before Constantine the Great boiled his wife alive in a bathtub and then converted the Roman Empire to Christianity, and all the genocidal wars of religion began after that. Remember, the Roman conquests were not about religion, they were about territorial warfare, conquest, not about religion. And after this has happened, after all these knuckle scraping troglodytes had poured out of the Syrian desert with their hammers and pickaxes, called Christians, and started attacking, and successfully destroyed 70% of the classical world's artwork and knowledge. If you don't believe me, read The Darkening Age by Catherine Nixie, and you will probably, if you're still a Christian, you'll probably be a Catholic, or you will see a Christ as more of a kind of an archetype than an actual someone you'd want to follow. Remember, look who, what do these Semitic religions have in common? They preach peace, but they give war. Sure, you get peace if you convert. If you don't, you die, and you get peace that way. All you have to do is look at the original group who followed this Jesus Christ character. You had Judas Iscariot. What does that mean? Judas the knife. He was an assassin. What does St. Peter mean? Petra, Rocky. He was a tough guy. He was the man for beating people up. It was a gang. It was a gang. And it was the only way the Djinn could infect the European consciousness is if the European consciousness became Semitic. So therefore, creating a Semitic consciousness within Europeans, therefore allowing the Djinn to come in. So a pagan consciousness was no use to the Djinn, and this is why when the Crusades came out of Vatican, which was founded again by a guy who boiled his wife alive in a bathtub, went on wars of conquest against Cathars, were a different kind of Christian. They didn't believe in the resurrection or the crucifixion, not the resurrection, sorry, and pagans. And when the infection discovered that Catholicism had brought too much paganism in, that's when the Reformation happened and the Lutherans started attacking the Catholics. Now, because the Catholics were moving more back towards paganism and away from being Semitic. Now, this is necessary for a full invasion. Now, that's like 1800 years, right? 1800 years we've had that. Because the Djinn is not a human being, it exists outside human space-time. So 2,000 years of them is no different than 2 seconds. 2 seconds is no different than 2 million years. It's irrelevant. So what seems like a hell of a long time for them to do it is centuries to us, millennia. Now, as I said, the beachhead was created when paganism came about. Now Europe is becoming Islamic. The full Semiticization of the European consciousness has now reached the critical stage. You have the head of the Vatican, a Jesuit named Pope Francis, saying that being practically welcoming Islam into Europe. Why? Because it's the same Jinn archetypes are driving boat. He knows that his future is secure for his masters, the Jinn, just as the Muslim jihadists are. They're the same thing. It's always been about the destruction of the European spiritual consciousness and the European soul. Now, this also, like everything else, it gives us the solution. Now, I'm a pagan, and I know that's something I'm very proud of. That's if I ever want to be remembered for something, is I hope I brought Europeans back to their true fate, their true spiritual identity. I don't like the word fate. And even if it was one or two, I'm happy. Now, let's talk about proof of the solution, right? I've given you the proof right there, right? Ever since Christianity arrived in Europe, it has been absolute mayhem, okay? Mayhem of religious sectarian wars and genocide. Non-stop. Non-stop. And it's continued to this day. And while Christians were concentrating on the West, the Islamic world was concentrating on attacking the pagans and the Hindus in the East. The Mughals, and remember, also look at the Persians. Persia was probably the most powerful pagan empire on this planet outside Greece and Rome. In fact, in some ways it was more advanced than Greece and Rome. And Alexander, of course, played a huge part in taking that down. But that was a war of conquest. That wasn't a religious war. It was the Islamic takeover of Persia that almost destroyed the world completely in many ways. Things happened later, like the Baghdad was destroyed by the Huns, but that's another story. But that was locked in. The most powerful pagan culture in the Middle East was taken down, and then the Middle East was fair game for jihad. Now, so the infection went to the east and then attacked India. We have Pakistan today. Pakistan, as Christopher Hitchens rightly says, is a country we shouldn't even respect its existence. It's basically a Djinn amputated part of India, pulled out of that culture and turned into an Islamic republic. And it's one of the greatest funders of terrorism and human misery in this world today, along with Saudi Arabia. Just look at the Middle East, my friends. Just look at it. Just look what it does to Westerners. Just look at the relationship it has with Westerners. Is that healthy on any level? All of it? Now, I'm singling out Christianity and Islam for the reason that they're evangelical religions. The other Abrahamic religion, Judaism, I'm not bothered by because it's not evangelical. They're not trying to convert us. So you can sit there, and I often think this whole thing of you all being terrified of that is another distraction from the Djinn. I'm not saying Israel is a wonderful nation or anything like that. I'm not saying any of that sort. I don't. That they are what they are. But I'm talking about the religious aspects outside that. The evangelicalism. Look, there's no difference between someone wanting to convert you either by crusade or jihad, or as they call it in the Pentecostal church, witnessing. There's no difference between that and a bacteria needing to spread. That's the Djinn. That's how the Djinn spreads. Conversions, either forced or by coercion. Now, this is also why you'll see, like in churches like the Pentagon, you go to these born-again Christian churches in Dublin, they're all full of ex-junkies and alcoholics. Why? Because they've been spiritually destroyed and they're easy to take down. And this makes you wonder about other things, the destruction of the Western human being. It makes bringing the spiritual firewall down. Now, I'm not saying Western Europeans are better than anyone else. We are equal to all peoples around the world. But we are under the same attack that later happened to Africans and Native Americans. We got it first. It's just that we don't recognize it in ourselves. We are starting to recognize it now. And where that came from is these Djinn-infected types from the Middle East. The solution. Anyone who's been to Paris recently, I have, will see that it's essentially an Islamic caliphate. It's complete. It's ready. And suddenly what happens is Notre Dame Cathedral bursts into flames. And what does everyone discover about it? As you saw in my video on Beyond Room 313, I'll put the link in the top below. The resurrection of the old gods. Vulcan emerged. Lucifer is emerging very strongly now. Athena is incredibly strong right now. They're appearing. The old gods are manifesting and appearing. And why? And why? Allies, help, spirit affection of the Jinn. It has to be. This has to. The archetypes and power forces and gods do not re-emerge unless there's a calling for them, unless there's a requirement for them, unless there's a need for them. We do not, pagans and people who practice proper real magic, never ever summon or invoke gods. We wait for the gods to call upon us. We read auguries and we read signs. And this is it. This is the reason I believe that the old gods have returned. They've come to protect us from the Djinn infection.